Rowan has very kindly agreed to answer questions if you have any. Has anyone a question to ask? Yes.
So, listening to what you've said, is the essence of drama, whether it's film, theatre, radio, TV, people making mistakes and people making the wrong choices?
It's a very interesting question. I suppose the answer has to be, in some sense, yes, because if any act or statement of mine were incapable of being answered or questioned, there'd be no story to tell. So whether or not it's exactly a mistake, certainly it's an imperfection. It's not there yet. What I say is something to which you can say something. When I give a lecture, you can ask a question. And it's that unfinished, ragged edge which keeps us moving. I think both in comedy and in tragedy, mistake and misperception work out. I can't remember who it was who said that comedy and tragedy are about the same kinds of thing. It just depends on where you're looking at it from. And there's a lot in that, and Shakespeare knew that better than anybody, because of course there are so many of his dramas where you're uncomfortably on the edge between those two. Comedy is often about profound misunderstanding of who you are, where you are, who somebody else is, and the absurd consequences that flow from not really knowing yourself or your world. Tragedy is about exactly the same thing, whereas comedy, with some audacity, as it were, catches the china vase that's about to hit the floor. So we can actually bring this back home again. We can get some weddings and some festivities and just, tie it up neatly. Tragedy steps back. That's a crash. But in both cases, you could say mistakes are at work on them. But at the heart of it is that sense, no, it's not over yet. It's not over yet. And a mistake is one particularly stark way of saying that.
Would you say that the writer's role is to control that conversation, to create a character who begins to listen to other characters and therefore becomes a rebel rather than a puppet? So you have to decide where you're going to, because some intervention must be necessary.
Yes, I'm tempted to say that I would maybe steer away from the word control and use the fashionable word curate. Of course, it's up to you what you put on the page. Yes, let's not be precious about this. But there is, you'll know much better than I, there is that element of almost an intent listening to what could be said there. I put it like that. So what could be said in response to that? And a moment of real invitation, something to come in which is different from saying, so he'll say that, then she'll say that, then he'll say that. So he'll say that. What could be said to that? What could be said in a way that moves you from A to B and actually shifts the trajectory of it in a way that keeps us engaged, keeps us watching? Does that ring bells for you?
It certainly does. It's listening to your characters as well as
listening to your characters.
As your plan.
Yes.
And
you kindly mentioned that I've had a go at drama from time to time myself. And one thing I found when I was trying to write that drama about Shakespeare, the young Shakespeare, was I was rather overwhelmed by how much listening I thought I was doing. Having roughly imagined a cast, and then hearing them coming into the light one by one. Yes, now that makes sense, that would work. But if she's going to say that or to talk to her, that's where she's coming from. So what's he going to think about that?
Yes, that is the business. But it's a thrilling business.
It's a very thrilling business, yes.
Yes, a conversation with yourself.
Yes.
Yes. Margaret.
Well, I'm going to ask quite specific question, which is, talk about lifestyle. I was talking about the style. Is
Is Prince Hal also a puppet?
I don't really know. I think that what you end up with Prince Hal, if you take all of that into consideration, is, to put it bluntly, a very unpleasant character indeed, who from the word go is theatricalizing his own behaviour with certain ends in view. I'm going to pretend to be a worthless young lout, so that everybody will be surprised and impressed when I turn out to be so wonderful. And the body count along the way is quite high, if you think about it. Yes, and I have profound prejudice here. I can't stand Prince Albert, and I can't stand Henry V.
Prefer Hotspur?
Oh, don't we all, actually, at the end of the day. Much more fun. But, yeah, I think a lot of versions of Henry IV don't quite reckon with the fact that that level of calculation is always running through. So that the rejection is, yeah, it's shocking, but maybe not quite so unexpected. I know thee not, old man, fall to my prayers. That's what you'd expect, really, if you listen to him at early points. So I think that could be an interesting example of those Shakespearean characters who are themselves engaged in a sort of dramaturgy. They are staging themselves in a particular way. Richard III, of course, is one of the early and extravagant examples of that. Richard is preeminently a self-theatricalizer, which is why, of course, in his soliloquy before Oswald, he's so completely lost, he doesn't know his audiences any longer. Richard loves Richard. That is, I am I. He doesn't know where to go with it. He's dependent on the love of an audience. He is sort of indulgent applause for these people. And indulgent applause is something which other soliloquizing villains look for. Edmund in King Lear. And I just wonder whether Hal has a bit more in common with them entirely comfortable.
John?
Do you think that the working out of human character in one's own life, becoming who we are, is a process of discovery rather than creation in the same way that you have described for fictional characters?
Is finding out who we are as characters ourselves a process of discovery rather than creation?
I think if we see our own self-development as a matter of creation, we end up with what I think is one of the most difficult fallacies of the contemporary world. You can be whatever you want to be. Now, that is often said to people in what I would regard as a perfectly understandable setting, people who've been told that they can't be interesting, alive in certain ways. But the swing of the pendulum towards, well, who you are is up to you. I think something's on a bit askew there. There's a context in which it makes absolute sense, moral sense, and there's a context in which it's quite dangerous because it's setting people up to fail. So the discovery element is important. It's not discovering a true self buried beneath everything else, this little kind of goblin sitting in you who is your ideal self. But it's learning to feel the texture and the fabric of the world you're actually in, learning to scrutinize your own emotions and hopes with clarity and patience, learning what you've learned, looking back over your life and saying, so that's how I came to be like this. And all that's discovery. And when all that is coming clear, you begin to see, so that's the next step that makes sense. That's where real freedom lies. Not that I've been hemmed in by all these things that have happened to me, but that I've been given resources to move forward. But to move forward, I need to know a bit more about how they work. need to attend to all those conversations that we've got.
Any more questions? Then perhaps I could end with just one simple, very simple question. We have in Radius, over the last few months, been asking the question, what do you consider to be the best of religious drama, stage play? Would you have a candidate? I mean, it's not a serious question in a sense. It's just nice to hear what people think.
Goodness.
We won't tie you to it.
No. I'd have to say it depends a lot what kind of mood I'm in, where I'm looking.
Yes.
There are moments, whereas I rather controversially suggested in the little book on tragedy I wrote a few years ago, moments when I think, bizarrely, something like Sarah Kane touches such a raw religious nerve in spite of the obscenity and the atrocity. But I think she's come quite near what matters most in all that. There are moments when I think an old chestnut like A Man for All Seasons still does its work, at least in giving us a portrait of what integrity was like. And just talking to somebody the other day who was saying that when he, a priest, when he performed baptisms, he would sometimes recall for the congregation that lovely image in A Man for All Seasons, where Moore says to Roper, when a man takes an oath, it's as if he takes water in his soul, and his hands like water. That's such a powerful image.
Yes.
And then there are moments when I think Sophocles takes a lot of improving on.
Yes.
And Oedipus at Colonus, and of course Antigone, again, are about the kind of integrity, the kind of human wholeness that does not depend on answering the questions that society wants you to answer.
Yes. There's quite a collection there. And would you throw in the templates?
I've not said anything about Shakespeare, but
Yes.
just fill the short list straight away there.
Yes.
But I'd give The Tempest a lot of room there. And I think among Shakespeare's plays, I still believe that for all its complexity, Measure for Measure remains both a deeply Christian and a deeply unfinished, untidy play.
Unsettling.
Deeply unsettling. But it has, of course, Measure for Measure, it has Shakespeare's greatest summary of Christian doctrine in it. Why all the souls that were forfeit once, and he who might advantage best have took, found out the remedy. Fantastic lines.
Yes.
And yet, of course, what happens in Measure for Measure is not saving exchange, or substitutionary atonement, or real reconciliation or redemption. It's a sort of complicated, rather baroque pile of evasions and short-term solutions.
Bargain.
Measure for Measure. There's another wonderful Shakespearean unnecessary character, Ian Holson. The criminal in Measure for Measure refuses to get up and be hanged because he can't be bothered. What's he doing in this play? Shakespeare is just thinking, we need a little bit of relief and tension here. Let's have a completely ridiculous character.
And it works.
And it works like a charm. Here is this completely graceless, condemned criminal saying to the jailers, I really cannot be bothered to get up and be executed. So just
Come back
later. And somehow that's one of the most authentic moments in Measure for Measure when everybody else is so busy playing their parts.
Yes. Thank you very much indeed. That's been wonderfully stimulating and helpful, more than helpful, look at Shakespeare and writing and theology, all manner of things. And I hope you will join me in thanking yet again Rowan Williams for a wonderful